Well, hello again. We're back in my cave of cool books. My name's Jeff, and this is my very first book haul video for this channel. Of course, I've had many book hauls in my life in the past, but this is the first one for the channel. I'm going to be breaking this up into two parts because it might be quite long otherwise. And another reason why I'm going to split this in two is because by doing so, this will be neatly split into two kinds of genres. This first book haul will fit nicely in the end here of June, in June on the Range. It's finishing up, it's wrapping up this last week. And a lot of the books that I got, or not quite, maybe a little less than half or around half that I got in this book haul were Westerns, or are Westerns. And mostly they are LouisL'Amour Westerns. Now this is going to be a small book haul by the standards of guys like Jake on Pulp Mortem, or Paul on Geeks Love Dogs, or Nick at the Book Graveyard, other guys that are getting huge book hauls. One aspect was that I bought most of these on eBay and in different kinds of lots, and it costs a lot of money to ship things now, not only in the United States across the country, but also to ship from the United States to here in Japan, to ship internationally. And so I had several different lots come together, and my sister kindly boxed them up for me and sent them to me. Typical of the U.S. Post Office, it sat in Los Angeles. The package sat in Los Angeles for over a week before it came to Japan. And of course, I got it within 24 hours once it arrived here in Japan. So just to kind of contrast the differing postal services there. Japanese one's quite reliable, thankfully. And despite the delay, I was very happy to get this package and be able to share some of these books with you. So first, I bought a lot of 10 LouisL'Amour Western novels from eBay, and they came out in really good condition. I was pleased because they were listed as, good to good condition, maybe good to very good. And I have to say, I agree. They're in quite nice shape. They came shrink wrapped in a box to my family's home in the United States, in Washington State. And when they arrived to me, they were in good condition. Now, all of these are Bantam editions. That's what most people, I think, at least from the 70s on, would associate with LouisL'Amour is his Bantam paperbacks, published in the millions with great cover art and, very hardy, long-lasting paperbacks usually. And the last one I'll show you is a Bantam, but it's with a different kind of livery, kind of different style, because it was published in the 80s, where these other ones were published mostly in the 70s through the 90s. So let me go through these one at a time. I'll go in chronological order of when they were originally published, for the most part. The last one has some very early pulp novels, short novels, but the book was published later, so I'll talk about those at the end of the LouisL'Amour section. But first, this one, Utah Blaine. And this was published in 1954 originally. Now this is the 1995 Bantam edition. And as you can see, they're in pretty good shape. Most of the Bantams have that famous cover photo of a relaxed looking LouisL'Amour. And this cover was, for the 95 edition, was by an artist called Gordon Crabb. And I'll just read you briefly the back of some of these, all right? Not all. This one apparently was originally published under a different name. LouisL'Amour published this under the pseudonym Jim Mayo, or Jim Mayo. And Pongo Jim Mayo is, by the way, one of LouisL'Amour's kind of tropical South Seas island adventure story characters that he's in several stories that are collected in this nice edition over here of the collected adventure stories, right? Pongo Jim Mayo and several other of L'Amour's kind of cool kind of World War II or era, shortly before, shortly after adventure stories. Anyway, Utah Blaine, pretty cool cover there. And again, you can just rely on LouisL'Amour to tell a really good story. They might be, they might be predictable in a certain way. You can guess that the main character is going to be big and lean and hard and a tough guy with a good heart, and he's going to wind up with a good woman probably by the end of the book. and he's going to face multiple dangers and threats on several different levels. And I think that predictability is okay. You know what you're going to get most of the time with a LouisL'Amour novel, and you get it served up with style. And what more can you ask? There's something to be said about formula or predictability of a certain genre, and sometimes that's what we're looking for. L'Amour throws in enough different plots, and some of his books are more epic, and some of his books are more smaller scale, and some of them are more mysteries, and some of them are more family drama. So he has some wrinkles that he throws in there that keep things lively, and almost all of his books are worth reading. I don't remember being ever disappointed by one I've read yet. Again, there's a lot I haven't read, including all of these. So I'm excited to get into his more than 100 novels, and I believe somewhere between 250 to 400 short stories. And he's got tons of story collections as well. All of these are novels, though. The next one I have is one of those epic types. Most of his novels, like Utah Blaine, for example, is about 164 pages. But this one, Sitka, which was originally published in 1957, and this is a 1983 edition with a cover by Louis Glanzmann. And this is, of course, about looks like a French character, Jean Labarge, who left the Louisiana swamplands and went up to Alaska to barter with the Russians and try to was spearheading America's incursion into Alaska. And it looks like he's romancing a Russian woman, perhaps, there. Anyway, this one is thicker, as you can tell, than the average LouisL'Amour Western novel. It's got a lot more chapters, and it's 245 pages, which, again, is not a long book, but by LouisL'Amour standards, that's pretty substantial. And that one's pretty interesting because it's a bit more of it's a Northwestern, I guess, more than a regular, LouisL'Amour book, which usually they're set somewhere in the Montana territory or the Arizona territory or down in Mexico or New Mexico, Utah, etc. Sometimes California. Next one. Unfortunately, some of these don't have any cover artist credit. This is one of them that doesn't, but it's a pretty cool cover with a nice use of color. I like that black background, like a roiling black cloud coming in. And this is The High Graders. And again, you can see these are in pretty nice shape, right? Rafter Crossing was the town building for an explosion when Mike Shevlin rode in. The cattlemen swore they'd close down the mines because they were poisoning the range water. The miners were stealing the high-grade ore that rightfully belonged to Lane Tennyson. Lane hired Mike Shevlin to get her ore back. She's a female mine owner. He had an old debt he wanted to pay back, but with lead, not gold. Okay. So if that doesn't sound exciting, right? Cattlemen versus miners with all sorts of shifty business going on in between. Typical L'Amour. He's not got just one kind of screw tightening on the hero. Usually there's several things going on that the hero, who is always resourceful and very competent with the gun and with the wilderness, has to contend with. Then we have the Key Lock Man. Now, the High Graders I forgot that. High Graders was published in 1965. This is a 1984 edition, Bantam edition, and there's no cover artist credited. Neither is there a cover artist credited for this one, The Key Lock Man, but that's a nice evocative painting as well for the cover there. And The Key Lock Man was also published in 1965. Later in the same year, in 1965, in December 1965 to be exact. This is the 1988 edition, and again, no cover artist is credited. Now, I read the back of this one, the back blurb, and it sounded so good that I had to start reading this right away. Probably my last thing I'll read for June on the Range, and I'm about halfway through it already. Let me read this to you and see if this doesn't immediately grab your attention. The posse was aiming to string Matt Keylock up from the highest tree, but Keylock was smarter and faster than a coyote. He should have been running scared, but he was playing Injun with them, circling back and then coming up behind, harassing them, shooting up their canteens like clay pigeons. If they'd had any sense at all, they'd have turned back before they even started, because when when Keylock ran out of funny business, there would be nobody left to laugh except the vultures. Doesn't that sound cool? Now, it's of course much more complicated and complex than that back description might lead you to believe. The people who were chasing Keylock, for the most part, are good, honest ranchers or farmers, and they have a reason to think that he's a scoundrel. Keylock's a scoundrel, but of course he's not. And there's all sorts of other things going on. So far, it's proven to be quite a good book and very evocatively written, capturing this kind of desolate desert area down in the American Southwest. Next, we have a book which was turned into a movie starring Sam Elliott and Kate Capshaw called The Quick and the Dead. Now the color, I don't know if the cover is faded or if that is the original color. Some kind of muted tones there, but it's a cool cover. Okay, and The Quick and the Dead was published in 1973. This is a 1994 Bantam edition with a Tom Hall cover. Pretty slim. I believe Kevin Toll read this one. This might have been one of the first LouisL'Amours he ever read. And it looks quite good. I'm looking forward to getting into that. I have seen the movie a few times, a big Sam Elliott fan. Kind of a love triangle, I suppose, of as a tough hombre helps a settler family, Easterner, and his wife and son. And the son starts to idolize the cowboy stranger, and the Kate Capshaw's, the wife, starts to feel a little something for this, mysterious man that's helping them out. But of course, the husband is a worthy man as well. Interesting book. I mean, interesting movie. I'm guessing the book will be interesting too. Sorry, it's a little hot in here. Sweating like a sweat hog because the air con makes a lot of noise. I can't really use it in this room, the air conditioning. Here's the next one chronologically going forward in time, and this is over on the dry side. 1975 was the original publication, and it was a 1994 edition as well, and the cover is again by Gordon Crabb. He did the first cover I showed you, and that's a pretty interesting looking cover. And this is, I don't know if these are related to the Sacketts or just another somewhat related family of characters over the decades of that L'Amour chronicled their stories of. But this is a Chantry, Owen Chantry, and this one also looks really good. I'd probably read this one next. When Owen Chantry returned to his brother's ranch for a visit, he found his brother had been savagely murdered, and two dirt farmers, father and son, and the book seems to be narrated by the son, a young preteen or early teen boy, were now building a life on his land. Chantry didn't mind the squatters much, but Mac Mowat's gang was another matter. Mowat believed a fortune was buried somewhere on the Chantry place. One man had died for it already, and Mowat told Chantry and the squatters they'd be next. That forced Chantry to make the only decision a brother could make: to make the cold-blooded killers pay or die trying. Sounds pretty cool. Looking forward to reading that. Next, we have The Man from the Broken Hills. Pretty cool cover there. This cover is also by Gordon Crabb. This was originally published in 1975, and this is the 1989 edition. And again, the cover is by Gordon Crabb. Okay, and then speaking of Chantry, we have another Chantry, Borden Chantry. Okay, now Borden Chantry, this is a Louis Glansman cover. This was published in 1977 originally, and this was a 1995 Bantam edition. Okay, so about 30 years old. So it's probably no wonder it's in pretty good shape. And then the last one with these cool painted covers, we have The Proving Trail. Now, no artist is credited here. Again, it looks to be similar artists to the other ones that weren't credited. Very cool kind of Western painting. And The Proving Trail was published in 1979, and this is the 1979 edition. This one's a little older looking, of course, and a little longer, 215 pages. And it's got a photo from the Sacketts, looks like, on the back, which is a really excellent TV movie with Tom Selleck, Jeff Osterhage, and Sam Elliott playing the Sackett brothers. Glenn Ford is also in this movie. And yeah, worth seeing. But again, this is just maybe came out around the same time as the TV miniseries and is being used as a advertisement, I guess, because at that stage especially, there were millions of these in print, and L'Amour was a household name. Now, the last Louis L'Amour I have is this more recent edition, which is, I guess recent is a relative term, but this is, from 1986, and this is called The Trail to Crazy Man. Not so interesting cover art. This is still a Bantam edition, and it's pretty thick because it contains 3 short novels that were written for the popes. Originally, they were written for the popes West and Giant Western, and they were since republished in this book. But the other thing that's interesting is that these 3 short novels, they were all roughly 100 to 120 pages of, fairly small print in this book. But they were all later adapted into longer novels and published under different titles by L'Amour. So you might have, if you're a L'Amour fan, you might have read the original, or the novels, the full-length novel versions, not these shorter versions from the pulp era. So there are 3 of these short novels, and the first one is The Trail to Crazy Man, which was later adapted into Crossfire Trail, which is a pretty famous L'Amour book, which was turned into a TNT movie, TV movie, starring Tom Selleck in the 90s, I believe. And then there's Riders of the Dawn. That's the story, the second story, and that was later published as Silver Canyon. And then Showdown on the Hogback, which doesn't really roll off the tongue, really. So that was later published as Showdown at Yellow Butte, which is a little more poetic sounding. Anyway, that concludes my 10-book Louis L'Amour haul. Okay, and then I have 2 more Westerns from an author that is probably not the first name that comes to mind when you think of Westerns, and that's Edgar Rice Burroughs. And I found some of these cool old 1964 Ballantine editions, again on eBay, separately from 2 different sellers. The War Chief and Apache Devil. Now, there's both good and bad about this. I'm very happy to have them. They're books I didn't have, and they are highly regarded by a lot of Burroughs fans. I'm a little miffed. My sister showed me these when they first came in, and I knew what to expect when I received them in my care package. But as you can see, their cover's in pretty good shape. Everything looks pretty good until you start to look at some of the... Now this one's not in so bad shape, but you can see the spine starting to crack a little bit there. I'm going to have to do a little Jules Burt repair on this one, I think. Jules, any tips? Feel free to pass them on. I'll watch some of your videos about that. And I think the War Chief... the first novel is even in worse shape, right? It's, again, everything is in pretty good condition overall. There's a few marks and scuffs inside, but it's just that it's just starting to come away a little bit. It's, I should be able to get one read out of it if I'm careful, but if I want to preserve it, I need to, kind of reglue some parts of the spine there and bag it and tag it, okay, to keep it in good shape. Now, let me just talk briefly about these books. Interestingly, these 2 books, have the exact same blurb on the back. You can see the first one, even though they're both from 1964, Apache Devil's in a little more pristine shape. So that's the one I'll read from here. But this gives a little background about Edgar Rice Burroughs and his pre-writing life, as well as something about these stories. So I'll just read this blurb briefly to you. These books were both published a long time ago, of course, almost 100 years ago. War Chief was published in 1927, and Apache Devil, the sequel, in 1928 originally. And these editions, again, are both from 1964. So this is what the blurb on the back, or the text on the back, says about these. Edgar Rice Burroughs enlisted in the 7th Cavalry, I can never say that word right, and saw active service in the Apache country of southern Arizona, knowing the country and its people and endowed with a fertile imagination. And anyone who's read Burroughs knows his imagination knows no bounds, really. Burroughs was able to see the great Indian wars from the Indian point of view. He wrote 2 books on the subject, The War Chief and Apache Devil. The first of these tells of the bitterly harsh rearing of a boy in the Apache tradition, a white boy who became known as Shoj Dijiji, the Black Bear, adopted son of Geronimo, with a venomous hatred for all whites. Shoj Dijiji, I don't know how I'm going to pronounce that in my head when I'm reading, but it's a kind of a tricky name, who in time becomes a great war chief like his dreaded stepfather. The second book, Apache Devil, takes the story of Shoj Dijiji further, telling of his lifelong battle with the Pony Soldiers, as he and Geronimo fight desperately to maintain life and dignity for their people. It tells also of the Black Bear's love, Shoj Dijiji's love for a white woman. Although independent of one another, the 2 books are best read in their proper sequence. Ballantine Books is proud to bring these 2 rare works of Edgar Rice Burroughs to a public which has long admired this author. And then again talks about how, giving themselves a pat on the back for, publishing all the entire Tarzan and Mars books in Ballantine editions. Anyway, I'm trying to flesh out some of my Burroughs collection. I got quite a few of his fantasy works and his Tarzan novels and things. But I've been curious about these, and they're very highly regarded among his works, so I'm glad to get these as well. So that concludes the Western portion, the June on the Range portion of this book haul video. Again, sorry for the sweat coming off of me here. It's probably in the high 90s and high humidity here in Osaka already. Lovely, lovely time of the year here. You're going to see a sweaty Jeff quite a few times through the months coming up here as I battle the elements. Usually I have this air conditioning going all day when I'm off work, so it would be nice and cool in here. I could turn it off for a little bit and survive okay, but I haven't had much time to get this room cool. So anyway, neither here nor there. That's my first half of this book haul. I'll be back with some fun other stuff. Again, older stuff for the most part. And I'll see you then in the second half of my first ever book haul video. Thanks for watching.